Welcome to the Pathway for today. So this weekend in our services, we were celebrating moms. And one of the people that we saw in that passage was a guy named Timothy. And how really the takeaway for Timothy was that for whatever had gone before him, Timothy needed to own his faith for himself. So if you're using the Pathway this week, you'll notice that the passages are not about Timothy. Instead, the core passages are Deuteronomy 17 and 1 Samuel 8, both of which are going to connect us back to 2 Kings. But what's really interesting is that in Deuteronomy 17, God is giving this instruction to Moses at a time when the people have no king. And he says, when you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you and possess it and dwell in it and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. Which is kind of a hint at a mistake because God is meant to be their king. And yet, that's exactly what happens in 1 Samuel 8. And so as you read those things, you'll see that God is planning ahead even for the ways the people are trying to take a different path than what he has planned. And so Deuteronomy 17, very much like what Timothy learned, is going to instruct the king that if he wants to be a successful leader, he has to make his faith his own. So I won't spoil any of the things that God specifically tells him there. But as you dig into this individually this week or with your group study, I want you to get really practical about what would it look like for me to take the instructions to the king, the pieces that will make him a successful king because of his faith in God, and apply them in my own life. Ways that I get into his word, ways that I talk to him, things that I count on, things that I don't pursue. And I think you'll find that something from all of those thousands of years ago is actually pretty practical in our lives today. In fact, when I was finishing grad school, one of my favorite profs was a guy named Don Carson. And a couple of years ago, I found a talk from him that said, this is the one passage that every pastor should read before they go into ministry, Deuteronomy 17. He said, if the kings had figured out what God was instructing them here, the entire nation would have been blessed for centuries instead of sort of slowly fading into captivity. So the same thing can be true for us. To bless those we lead, to bless our families, to experience that ourselves, there's some really good stuff in Deuteronomy 17. So enjoy that this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on The Pathway.